Hello everyone, welcome back. So before we are moving on to generics and how to create them, we need to understand what is arrays and what is collection and why we moved from arrays to collection and then why we moved to generics. So in order to understand that, we just need to find out what is there in arrays and what is not there in collection and what is the difference between arrays and collection. We need to know the difference, and I can show you the difference with a real-time example or a simple example, so you can easily understand so why we move to arrays from collection and what is the advantage of having arrays and what is the disadvantage of having a collection. Right? So let's move on. Let's try to understand. Okay, so first it's everything starts with an array and then we move on to collections, because when Java was introduced that we have only arrays, and after later point we moved to collections, and after collection the generics came into the picture, which means after Java 5. In Java 5 only we got generics. Let's not talk about generics here. Let's talk about the difference between the arrays and the collection. Okay, so when it comes to an array is a fixed size. So once it is created, you cannot modify the size. We all know how to create a syntax. How to create an array. We know the syntax, right? So int array and is equal to new int array, and you need to provide the size of it. So once you provide the size, the array cannot be extended more than that. But the other way around, collections, it will give us the freedom to increase the collection size based on the data which is required and based on the data we are processing. So when it comes to a size, array is static and collection is dynamic. You don't have to specifically mention how much data I'm going to process in this particular collection. And the next point, when it comes to memory, array is not recommended. The recommended one is collection. And then array is much faster. So when array is much faster, then why do we need to go for collection? So which means there is something is not there in arrays and something is available in collection. And I'll tell you the reason why arrays is much faster. I'm not going to tell right now because I'm going to create an example and I'll tell you why it is much faster. And the another important thing, arrays can hold both objects and primitive. But when it comes to collection, it can only hold the object types. It will not handle the primitives, because when you create a collection, it has to be wrapper class objects. It will not take int table or something like that. Right? So enough is enough. Let's create a simple example and I'm going to show you what is there in arrays and what is there in collection and what is the difference between these two. We're going to see it in a real time an example. Let's jump into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time to see the difference between arrays and collection. Okay, we have seen few points. What is the advantage of array and what is the disadvantage in collection? So when it comes to array, the size is the problem. Correct? So let's see how it can be done. So first let's talk about array. Let me create a simple array. So I'm going to create a string of array s is equal to, so new string, and you have to provide the size of the array. So for now I'm gonna pass only 10. So which means in this particular array you can store only 10 elements. So for example, s of 0th element, I'm gonna provide some name John, and I'm gonna provide s of 1, and array index starts with 0, not with the 1, right? And the second name I'm going to provide as a Nancy. Got it. Okay, so now what is the problem? Let's check. Can we add something like this? S of 11 is equal to Sam. So there is no errors. So which means we can add. Does it look like? Yes, it looks like we can add, but what will happen when you run the code, it will throw an exception. Okay, so let me show you that. So let me print the data and string array is let's print the array. Yes, now I'm gonna run this. It's running. Eventually it throws array index outer bound exception, which means you're providing a size into an array, but you're giving the value out of the array, which means I can only store 10 elements, but you're trying to store the 11th element, which is not possible. That is the error message as well, index 11 out of bounds for the length chain. So that's the one thing. So we cannot add, that's a disadvantage. So we cannot add more size once it is declared. That's what. Okay, so fine. So what next? Okay, so can we add some other different type of data? Let's do that. So s of 2, I'm gonna provide something like new integer, and I'm gonna provide just 100, which is not possible at all because this particular array is dedicated for string. So which means you can only assign the string values. You cannot assign some different kind of a data. Okay, so which means this is all not allowed. It will throw error message in the compile time itself. So now when we talked about arrays and collection, the one thing is one advantage in arrays, you don't have to typecast the data because it's a string array. It only accepts the string, so you can only receive as a string. You don't have to typecast it. What I'm trying to say is here, so string name is equal to, so let's say I want to retrieve what is the data available in s of 0. That's all. I don't have to any typecasting here normally like this. You don't have to do that because it's already a string. You don't need to typecast them again. Okay, so now we know what we can do in array. So we can add the elements, and we have a specific limit because we assigned a string array can only hold 10 elements, right? And then we know that once the array is declared as a particular type, you cannot add any other type. So I can add string, but I cannot add some other type integer because the array is dedicated for string, and I don't need to typecast. And most importantly, the another point, type safety. That is a major important thing in the array, type safety, because when I enable this line, it will throw an error message, which means this is called as a type safety. While creating the data itself, it's throwing you an error saying like you cannot be adding some other type of a data here because it is belongs to a string and you're trying to add an integer. So that is a type safety. So now we know it has a typecasting, type safety, and also there is no need for typecasting. Okay, so now let's move on to the collection. So let's go back to collection. Let's go to collection now, and we'll see what it can be done. So in array, you cannot add multiple type of a data, which means the type safety is there. Okay, so let's create a list here. A list li is equal to new array list. Okay, now I'm gonna add something. So it's a similar kind of a data, li dot add, and it's going to be again a John. Cool. And then li dot add. So I'm gonna add Nancy here, and this is where things are getting pretty interesting. So li dot add, and now I can add a new integer of 100. See, which is still allowed. So how come it is possible? Because list can hold any kind of objects, correct? So it adds string, it takes Nancy, again string, and takes an integer also. But what is the problem with the collection? Okay, so now I want to retrieve the data which is available from the list. For now, I'm gonna print the li. Let's see what happened. It will just print John, Nancy, and the integer value. Okay, so let me try to add, trying to retrieve the data from the list. For example, I want to retrieve li dot get of, for example, 1, right? So what I need to do here, So we have a Nancy, right? So it's a string home and string name 1 is equal to, see what happened? It is an error because the 0th position is as John, which is a string, and the first position as a Nancy, which is another string. But here I'm retrieving as a string of name, but it still is throwing me an error. So that's a problem. So the collection has a string, but why it is still throwing me an error? Because it's a raw list. So when you're using collection, when you're retrieving the data, you have to typecast the data. You don't have a choice because it has a multiple types of data. So in order to retrieve the information, you like it or not, you have to typecast it. For example, I'm trying to retrieve the value from the second position 0 1 2. Okay, let me do that. So li dot get of 2. So now it's an integer, right? So int value is equal to, again it is throwing an error because you need to typecast it, because we don't know what the type is gonna come in the list. It can be string, it can be boolean, it can be character, it can be an integer or double or whatever. So we have typecast. So we know that it is going to be integer here, so we have to typecast to int now. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna print the value and here I'm gonna print out the name 1. Okay, so let me run it. Now I got the name, I got the value as 100. So now in front of our eyes we can see the problem with the collection. So why array is much faster? Because array doesn't have to typecast the data, because it is a type safety. Because the moment I created an array, it knows that it is going to be a string. So it's dedicated for string. So you don't have to typecast, or you don't have to provide any type safety, because by default it's a type safety. It's a dedicated one. But when it comes to collection, it's a list. Lists contain any kind of data or any kind of objects. So here we have to typecast the information. So now this is where the generic comes into place, because we have some issues in the array and we have some issues in the collection, which means the type safety and typecasting both has been addressed in the generics. So I'm going to show you another simple example how it can be done. Or maybe I can do one thing. So we have a one more example right previously. So the generic example. So here, this is a generic method which is returning the data. Correct? So I want to retrieve, for example, we have a 0 and 1, right? So 2 elements, I want to retrieve the first element. Correct? So what I'm trying to do is, let's copy this. So when you're using generics, you don't have to typecast, and it is a type safety. So let me show you generic method apple dot get of 0, and I'm going to create a variable. See, do I need to create any variables here? I mean, typecasting here? I don't need to be, because it's a generics. So generics, it's a type safety, because I don't know what is the type it's going to come here. It can be anything. So once it's assigned to the generics, that type is dedicated for that particular entire method. So you don't have to do that. You might think, okay, well, will it print the data? Of course it will. So value. So I'm gonna print the S here. Okay, so let's run it. See, we got apple, which is a get of 0. That is the data is available in the method call. So when it comes to generics, it's much better. So there are issues in arrays, there are issues in collection. Everything has been addressed in the generics. So wherever it's possible, try to use the generics. Let's move on to the next topic.